Hey everyone, it's Christopher, Mono County Library Director and co-host of the Oxygen Starved podcast and its Book Talk Friday, where I share two great reads from the library collection, one old and one new. You know, many years ago, I remember my first day of kindergarten, the nice teacher leaning over and asking me if I wanted to go by Chris or Christopher. I had never been asked that before, so of course I blurted out Chris. I think I disappointed my mother. Later in college, when I was surrounded by a whole bunch of other Chris's, I reverted to using Christopher again. And I tell this story because it is one reason I relate to the main character in the first book I'm going to recommend, The Namesake by Jhumpa Lahiri. Now, Lahiri has a new book out called Whereabouts, and I can't wait to read it. She won the Pulitzer Prize for Fiction straight out of the gate with her first collection of stories called Interpreter of Maladies in 1999. She followed it up in 2003 with The Namesake, her first novel, which was made into a popular movie. This novel tells the story of a young man and woman who are Bengali living in Calcutta in the late 60s, and they get married in an arranged marriage and then immediately emigrate to Massachusetts so that he can study to be an engineer at MIT while his young wife, who knows no one in the States and no English, is expecting their first child. Now, there's a Bengali tradition of naming that involves having both an informal family name and a formal public name. They choose to name their firstborn son Gogol after the famous Russian novelist as the family name and Nikhil as his public name. Similar to my experience, his parents expect the boy to use Nikhil in school when he enters kindergarten, but he doesn't understand why and insists on sticking with Gogol, and the teachers let him. As you might expect, the young boy of Bengali immigrants growing up in the Boston area in the 1970s and 80s experiences all the awkwardness of trying to be accepted into both his Bengali and American cultures. And he soon understands his name Gogol is so different from his friends and classmates that only amplifies the awkwardness he feels. As he enters college, he formally changes his name back to Nikhil to his father's chagrin. You learn the significance of that act in this beautifully sculpted novel. She draws you into an intimate immigrant story of the young man's trajectory into finding his own balance between his Bengali roots, the American culture he's part of, and the true meaning of family in the long run. This is The Namesake by Jhumpa Lahiri. Now let's talk about the new. Saigon, a misfits memoir of great books, punk rock, and the fight to fit in by Phuc Tran. Now, this is a memoir. It came out last summer in which the Vietnamese-born Tran talks about escaping the fall of Saigon as a young child with his family in 1975 and ending up in suburban Pennsylvania. His true story echoes many of the same themes recounted in The Namesake, right down to a young boy just trying to fit in while having a given name that sounds awfully funny to American ears. When they arrive in blue-collar Pennsylvania, they quickly discover they're the only Asians in town, and his father, a lawyer in Vietnam, finds work in a factory and his mom finds a job picking apples. They also learn that the country that rescued them from Vietnam is filled with people who don't understand them, especially the Vietnam vets who treat them with open distrust, and the other people who just make racist comments to them in public. For instance, they quickly learn you go to McDonald's, use the drive-thru, don't go into the restaurant. The young Phuc, whose name naturally gives itself to relentless schoolyard taunts, struggles to prove himself, first by being the smartest in class, and later as a teenager by becoming a rebellious skate punk. As his teen years move on, he looks around his town and he wonders how he can ever escape it. And he comes across an old list of books purporting to be the 100+ titles everyone should read to be all American. So he dives in headfirst and swims through Nathaniel Hawthorne, Oscar Wilde, Franz Kafka, William Faulkner, Jack Kerouac, the whole sweatin' to the oldies list. As you might expect, this is the moment in the memoir in which he begins to find himself. And I'm not giving anything away by telling you this skate punk becomes a Latin teacher and, like all good Gen X kids, a successful tattoo artist. This memoir focuses mostly on his life up and through college, and it's tempting to say this is that classic immigrant refugee story of a child who overcomes those kind of expected noble challenges, but I say instead it's an at times funny, at times difficult, compelling story of a young Asian immigrant who overcomes those noble challenges, but also many that are just embarrassing and many that are universal teenage issues hitting us no matter where we were born or the color of our skin. You can hear Phuc Tran talk about being a geek, specifically a language geek with tattoos, in a TED Talk if you Google him. Now, both the memoir Saigon and the novel The Namesake are stories rooted in Asian cultures and yet are uniquely American stories. And they're both good. and they're both available in Mono County libraries. I encourage you to stop by any of our 7 locations to find great reads, and in the meantime, stay safe and happy reading.